We are here to talk about software testing. I would say that an untested code is not worth deploying to production. So software testing is as essential to software development as air is essential to breathing or life. As we know, software testing helps us to eliminate most of the defects and bugs before they get to production. And here in the panel with me, I have these leaders in the industry who bring a unique perspective to software testing. And today, they will be delving deep into this context. So I will start with Belinda. She has been a test engineer at BK, and she is now a quality assurance lead there. And at the middle is Isabella. So she's the managing director of Test Solutions Rwanda. And at the far end is Eliane, and she has been a test engineer at Irembo for over 3 years. So let's start with the why. Why do we test? Let's start with you, Belinda.
A question came in my mind. Why not test? Because it's like you can't be really sure that a product is working if you have not tested it before. And it's better you test it yourself before the customer do the work for you. So it's really important to test and make sure that whatever you expect the product to do is what it is actually doing, because so many surprises comes up during testing. Yeah.
So what do you think, Isabella?
Thank you so much. I think the same thing as Belinda. Thank you so much, Belinda, for the question. Why not testing? For me, the perspective is business-wise. Why not testing if you have been paid to do the job and then later get disappointed and disappoint the client and also lose the business at the end? So testing is all about assuring the business, the happy customer, and the reputation as a company to gain more clients. Thank you.
All right, let's get your insights, Eliane. Why testing?
I think they've covered up the most important parts, but maybe to add on to that, I'd say also identifying the gaps that are in the industry with our products, as tech is an ever-growing industry, so always testing, knowing what else to improve could put you at the forefront of the industry.
All right, let's start from the middle. Isabella, can you help us maybe emphasize the importance of test planning and the definition of a comprehensive test plan and strategy?
Yes, thank you so much. I will speak from the experience, not from the definition. Test planning and the test strategy is, I can say it's a living document, but the importance matters. The test planning covers several aspects. It covers the objective of the test. Why do you want to test? And the target. It covers the resources you will use. It covers the skills you use. It will cover the scope of work, because at the end you can't know that the test is done. You need to have a scope of work. It covers the techniques you will use to test a specific system, if it's a web or app or embedded, it depends. So it covers the schedule. How am I going to do this test? It covers the risks management. It covers also the test coverage. And lastly, more important, the reporting. So that's the test planning. But when it comes to the strategy, then it covers the approaches. How am I going to approach this test? What will tell me that the test is done? And what will tell me that the test coverage have been reached to the extent to be delivered and deployed on production? We have a say in QA or test industry that exhaustive testing is impossible, and it is impossible because you will never find a software that is bug-free. But you will minimize the bugs at the extent that at least for 80% to be used, because the most critical bugs have been closed by the collaboration of a team, testers, the developers, stakeholders. Thank you.
Maybe building upon tests is not exhaustive. Can you tell us the types of tests you do today?
Type of tests, there are two types of tests. There is functional test and non-functional test. Functional test covers several test levels and several aspects of test. It might be usability, it might be the functionality, it might be the performance of the system, it might be the security, it might be the interoperability test when it comes to interconnection of devices, it might be the compatibility of the test, it might be user experience test. Really, the type of tests are different, and there are many. Non-functional then covers the automation, covers the security, the performance, usability as well is a non-functional testing. You can call it functional testing because it's more of user experience. That's why you perform this test at the end to confirm how it is behaving. Is it user-friendly? Is it easy to use on the market or the users? So there are two types of tests in different test levels.
Thank you very much. So let's move to Eliane. Can you tell us, she's talked about test plan and test strategy. So how do you document this when you want to actually carry out the testing? So which steps do you usually take?
On the how I document it, I'd say where is Notion, since it's the one space where all of the stakeholders can go and have visibility on what is going on, and on what steps I take. I'd say I start with reviewing the test basis, understanding the product that I'm going to be testing on, and then from there building up on exactly what she said, identifying the schedule, the resources that are going to be needed, assigning the product areas to the different types of people that are going to be participating on the test, setting the accountability, the people who are going to be accountable for the tests and for interacting with the stakeholders, making sure that everything is documented down to how you will be reporting your tests is really important in that step. I'm not sure I got everything in your question.
Yeah. Maybe I would interject a bit. So you mentioned Notion. How many of us here know Notion? So is there any other tool? Okay. Is there any other tool you would think of for people who don't know about Notion?
Anywhere you can write the test plan that is going to be accessible by a lot of people is good, even if it's a Google Doc sheet. So as long as you have your steps and everything that she's mentioned in your sheet, and you make sure that every person who is relevant to that specific project is assigned to the tasks, then has access to the sheet, then that would be good.
Oh, thank you very much. Maybe a final, you said anywhere. Can I do test plan on a notebook?
If you're going to photocopy it and give it to the stakeholders, why not?
Okay. All right, let's move to a bit of test automation. I think it's been highlighted as part of the non-functional tests, right? Okay, I'm following. So maybe can you highlight the benefits, Belinda, of test automation?
Test automation offers so many benefits compared to manual testing. Manual testing limits the testers in terms of coverage. Like, as a human being, we can only perform tests at a certain level. But the test automation gives us the opportunity to cover so many test scenarios in a short time. So the testers who are using the automation testing strategy, they cover so many tests in a short time, and they cover so many features in that testing. That is one. Second, there is also the speed. It's like with the automation tools, you can really do faster the testing compared to the manual process. And also, with automation testing, we are also sure that we do something, we have consistent test results. It's like, because the process is like uniform, when you are repeating the same scenario, you go through the same thing and you get the same results. So if it's a test that is happening after a feature has been like updated, and you are testing the feature to see like if the changes have somehow affected the whole product in a way or in another, automation helps in doing those tests and those exact same tests that you have performed before, and it can help you see the results, if they are still the same or if somehow they have been changed. And when you see defects, you can easily fix them on the new release.
All right, thank you very much. So Isabel, can you help us maybe list some tools or frameworks you use for test automation? Tools? Yes, or frameworks.
Yeah, thank you. There are several tools and frameworks out there, but the most used, the Selenium WebDriver, I can tell. Cucumber, it's also a good tool and the framework to use. You can use Catalan, or you can use Test Cafe. Though what I'm telling is what I've used, but I know there is several tools and framework out there. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Eliane, can you tell us the importance of including this automation in your CI/CD process?
I think the importance is really in the definition, because CI/CD means continuous integration, continuous delivery. So it is going to fasten the feedback loops between QA and the developers, so they can get firsthand the information they need from you without waiting for you to finish the regression tests within, let's say, a week. So that also improves the amount of time that we need to deliver the product or a new service or release an improvement to the production environment. So yeah, you fail fast. I think there's a saying in it is you build fast, you fail fast, or you win fast. So yeah, having it in the CI/CD process really helps speed up development.
Okay, talking a bit about flaky tests in test automation, how do you handle it, Isabella?
Come again.
Flaky tests, flakiness of test.
What is flaky? Shaking. Oh, flaking. Okay, of the test automation, you mean? If I can tell from the experience, test automation is not a robot. You don't just have to put a script there and then they will run by themselves. You need to update the scripts. That's one. Yes, they used to uncover the defects during the system, but because needs the brain of the person at the end to be updated. As the developer adds something on the feature on the system, you need to update your script. Don't expect script to run the script the same thing you've written them down, and just give it to the developers to reuse as a regression test during the smoke test. So that's one of the flaking. So it also requires one person to always have an eye on those scripts. And for having an eye on those scripts, you need to have a skills. If the technology evolves a new knowledge, then you need to update your script accordingly. It's continuous learning. That's a disadvantage and advantage at the end. Okay? If you rely so much on test automation and manual testing, just trying to forget it or just put it in the cupboard, I'm guaranteeing you're not doing anything to assure the quality.
Thank you very much for your insights. So, Eliane, maybe can you tell us about regression tests and how it actually helps in preventing bugs in releases?
Well, I think she just explained it a bit, but to reiterate, when you're repeating your tests all the time, especially with automation, sorry, let me start over. Since there's going to be improvements and changes to the production environment, or at some point when you need to deploy a new fix or something into the production environment, you always need to make sure that you're repeating the old test cases that you had, so that nothing has failed, nothing has changed from the previous requirements.
All right, thank you very much. Isabel, back to you again. I know you work with a lot of developers, and there are a lot of them here. So what's the interaction like? What's the process like when you work with developers?
Hard. Really hard. Challenging, but it's a journey. Because there is I can just call it bias, to be honest. There is a bias between testers, PO, DPO, and devs. Mostly come to the devs. They have this misperception that QA is kind of controlling their work, which is not true. And product managers are relying on quality assurance testers to tell him the product is, let's say, 80% ready to be deployed and should be on schedule. And then the man in the middle, the QA, get embarrassed in the middle. And if you don't have interperson communication skills to link up all this, then it could be a mess. But let me tell fellow developers and product owners around here in the house, QA shouldn't see QA as a bottleneck to you. No, but a contributor, and actually a person that helps you looks good. I always use this word, looks good in your craft. When you work together, change the mindset. I'm not controlling your work. I'm helping you to focus on most important thing, and then leave the half done to me to help you out. And like this, the product owner, our boss, will be happy, and our client will get what they asked for. At the end, we celebrate during our retrospective. So we help you look good, and we talk over a half work while you are concentrating on the other magic. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I picked up, as a developer, I've picked up a lot from what you said. First of all, it helps focus our work to what is really important. And also, it helps us look good, yeah? So we should see QA more as collaborators and as, I would say, drivers, because you help us drive that focus. So I think it would be a question that the other panelists can chip into. What has your experience with developers been like? Maybe we can start with Belinda.
Well, I can say that it's not that easy, but communication really is an important thing in the collaboration between developers and testers. Because my background is as an IT, I know what codings can be. And as an experienced tester, I know what QA can be. So I'm somehow in the middle. I try to understand them and explain them where I am and what I want to do. Like, I try to tell them this is my work, this is what I want you and I to achieve. It's not a fight. We have a common goal. Yeah.
All right, Eliane, what has been your nightmare with developers?
With you. Yeah. Well, like they said, it's hard, but I understand it since nobody likes being told that they're wrong. So being the person who's always telling somebody that they are wrong on the work that they've spent a whole night on can get to them. So it's understandable. But also, I've had a pretty good experience with developers. Some of them, sometimes, we have our days. But yeah, at some point, when you learn to communicate better with them, as you said, having those proper interpersonal skills, they really get to see your point of view and then adopt more of a QA mindset when they're developing and making sure that they verify, test their own codes on their local machine before they deploy it to UAT or before they get it to you. I've even had some of them ask me how they can test their code performance-wise on their local machine to be able to make sure that what they're sending to me is okay. So I guess I've had a pretty good experience with developers so far.
That's amazing. But maybe to expand on that, when there is heated argument or you don't see the argument being resolved maybe in the next sprint, how do you really go about that?
Well, it helps to have processes in place on what happens in that case. So as long as I have my test case, the test case has not passed, it's based on the test basis, the data is there to show that your code will not be shipped to production. So even though the argument is heated and, we can just keep fighting, the data is there. And we also have a process here where no matter what happens, the QA is the one responsible for sending a release. So they can't go over your head to go deploy something. So that helps a bit.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, you can add to that.
I would like to add to what Eliane just shared. I think it helps bringing in someone, a third party in, like the product owner is the best person who understands the scope of the test and what is expected to come in between and help you cool the environment.
All right, that's amazing. So let's maybe switch a bit to performance testing. I believe most of the applications we at least are working on here is being used by a lot of people. And we need to know is battle ready for worst case scenarios. So maybe we can start with Belinda. What is performance testing all about and what benefits does this bring?
Performance testing is about, is a kind of testing that helps the system owners or system testers to see how good a system is doing in terms of usability, in terms of responsiveness, in terms of network, and other things in that area.
Okay.
So the benefits?
Yes, I think you've highlighted a bit of the benefits in performance testing. Maybe we can move a bit to Eliane. So which strategies do you use for performance testing? Or how do you go about it?
How do I go about it?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of tools, we use JMeter since it's very easy to use to implement the scripts, and it can be integrated with any other performance testing related tool most of the time, not all of them. But yeah, so we use JMeter and we run the tests on a server, since using your local machine, as maybe the panelists know, can be pretty hectic in terms of like the CPU usage of your laptop and how you and the capacity that your laptop has. So how I go about it, I'd say the primary metric that I measure is response time, since that will tell you everything on the latency, the throughput, and everything, how much time the users have to wait before accessing a service. So I'm not sure I got everything you wanted.
Yes. Maybe you can chip in, Isabella. Specifically, if someone who, like, when would you consider doing load testing or performance testing? I'm building an app that my friends and me will use. Do I need to bother?
Thank you for the question. Yes, for your reputation. And it depends on the business, still yes. Because it gives you the clear picture in the future. If people likes your mobile app, said, then they ask you to expand or add in some more features to use. You still have to think about the performance of it in the server. the scalability of the server, if when it comes to the concurrent user logging in on your system concurrently, how my system behave, how is it responding, So you still have to wonder and consider it during the requirement refinement, because that's where you really define the requirement that will tell you the performance, and the developer have to build upon those requirements. We call them non-functional requirement, and then the tester will perform the performance test technique like load testing or stress testing at the end to see if the developer has considered this requirement during the process. Thank you. Mostly for the scalability.
All right, thank you very much. A bit back to Eliane, still dwelling on load testing. You talked about response time as a key parameter. So how does that play back to the developers? Let's say maybe the response time is high. Like, how would they work around it? Or is it like a developer's issue? What other parameters do you have to look at?
Okay. The other parameters that we usually look at are the types of errors that the system is throwing to us, if there is any. Or even as a tester, I think it's important for us to check the request that you're sending to make sure that the parameters that we're using while trying that load stress test or any endurance test is correct to the specific scenario and has the right allocated resources to it. So we also, the infrastructure team also chips in to make sure that we have the appropriate amount of resources in place for us. I think that's it.
All right. Anything to chip in, Belinda?
No.
All right. So I think we can have a break for questions so far because we've had a longer argument here or long conversation. So does anyone in the audience have questions so far? All right.
You talked a bit about automation tests. So I would like to know what are the criteria for a selection of automation tools? What do you really have to go through just to make sure you are choosing the right tool or the right framework? Since it happens when you go through, you choose a tool, you use it, and at some point, you get stuck. You need to go back. So what is really the criteria from the beginning you go through to make sure you are choosing the right tool?
Can I go for it?
Yeah, you can.
Well, it's important to look at the infrastructure of the automation tool itself, because it will play a big role later. Like looking at the cross functionality of the tool on different browsers. Like some tools, they can perform well on internet browser or Chrome, but they don't perform that well on other browsers. And since applications can be used on so many browsers, it's really important that the operability between the tool and the browser is really working well. And it's also important to know the kind of tool that is going to be used on which operating system. Because also some tools, on the way they are built, they can work well on some specific operating system. And when that operating system gets maybe updated, it can be really an issue to still use that tool. So it's important, those basic infrastructure details, to make sure that they are working well. Yeah.
Yeah, you can chip in.
Yeah, another thing I work on, at the end it's a tool and the person will use it, will be you, Micheline. Then also your skills is matter here. The tool, which language are you writing in your script? Is it compatible with my library I'm going to install in my framework? That's important as well. Secondly, the price as well. Yeah, it might be cheaper today, and then tomorrow if they add in new plugins, and then you need those plugins, and then get expensive, they can't afford it. You have to look in all angles. And of course, as Belinda said, also the compatibility of the device and the browsers you want to automate in. Is it flexible? Is it cross-functional? Is it cloud-based? Is it they have to consider all that. Thank you.
Elian, do you have anything to chip in?
I would say just one thing, since you've covered most of it, but a foolproof method that I've used most of the time is just trying out like maybe 5 critical test cases, trying them out on the application while you're still in the trial period of that week, and then go from there.
All right, I have a question for you guys. It's a question, but not a question. So most times moderators think they know it all, you draft questions you ask, but maybe the panel, you have something you want to share which has not been covered in whatever I'm asking. So personally, we are talking about building best practices in web testing. So is there something which I've not asked that you really want to share with the audience?
Best practices. Best practices goes with the methodology each company chooses to work in. But I know that Agile is trending now, and it's more flexible. I would even recommend it. So there is a best practice when you work in the Agile environment, or there is a practice and principles where just you are a QA to follow. So when you are a QA and quality assurance tester, you should be prepared for test levels. You know which test to run at which level. As software development has a cycle, testers as well, we do have cycle. We call it software testing life cycle, and it has phases. So every phase align with exact phase of the development. If they are doing requirement gathering, then we are doing test planning and requirement engineering part. When they are doing development, let's say, we are now jumping on the test design and analysis. And there is some activities under each phase. I will share for people who want to know more technically. And when they're doing, let's say, smoking and the other thing on the developer phase, we jump into test implementation. That's where now we set the environment will be working with. If it's an automation, you need to set up your environment for test automation with the help of developers and run one script, let's say, and see how it reacts. You go to the next phase, which is test execution. You might execute manually or automated. It depends on the type of test you are running. And then you move on to the phase, which is reporting, using different test management tools. They're different. They could be Jira with X-Ray, could be Jira with Z-File, could be Trello, could be, tons of tools. Because there now you are, for the test execution, the best practice, not only execute and then align with test defect management on there. So that is a practice. And then at the end, you come out with the test report. If you're using a tool, it's easier. You see it in terms of Kanban or graphics. It tells you according to how you set it up based on technique you used and coverage you've chosen. That will tell you the test is done. And then you have the clear picture using, let's say, 80-20. That means practice of spend 20% of your energy testing, but assure 80% of the quality of the product. So it gives you all that at once. That could be a best practice as a tester. But when it comes to the Agile methodology, the best practice is the team collaboration. Because in Agile, there is no tester, there is no developer, there is no product manager, there is no Scrum, but they call it the development team. That means tester, the power of 3, tester, developer, and product owner. So it is your responsibility as a team to assure the quality and delivery. So there is a high collaboration on each phases, and there is constantly feedback, constructive feedback, and communication at the high level. There is celebrations. Those all are the best practices to use in agile methodology. And you follow the ceremonies. We know the ceremonies. Sprint planning, grooming background, backlog, not background, backlog grooming. I don't know what. Sprint review, retrospectives, all those. They're the best practices to follow when you are using Agile, mostly Scrum framework. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Isabel. I would like to emphasize on what Isabel just shared. Like, there's an assumption for developers mostly that testers come in when the work of development is done. But usually the best practice will be, like, from the beginning, at the requirement gathering phase, to have testers involved, like the QA, for them to check through the documentation to see if the documentation is well done, because some errors start from the gathering of requirements. Sometimes the customer or shareholder may share one requirement that is not totally true from the beginning, like his expectation or her expectation of the system may not be that well said or well put from the beginning. So as a technical tester, as a QA, it really helps to be there from the beginning, to challenge those thoughts from the beginning, not like at the end when the development is done and the whole product is there and you start challenging something that may change the whole coding. So that's one. And also it really helps to make good testing documentation, like having those documents in place, the test scenarios well written, the scope well defined. It also helps in matters of who is right and who is not right, like that kind of fight that is always there between developers and testers. At least when there is a document, you know what you can refer to know what is right and what is wrong. And another thing also that is helpful, another good practice is also to check the good interoperability between the back end and front end. Sometimes, there is an app and there is the server, so it's good to check that connection from the beginning if it's really working well, so that the testers' work at the end is really made easy when they are doing their testing.
All right, thank you. Eliane?
Yes, I think they've covered most of it, but I'm just going to reiterate more on the importance of testing during the software development lifecycle. There are a lot of bugs that could just go from requirements to design just as easily as it goes from UAT to production. So as much as it could be slowing down the beginning of the development process, taking your time with the requirements and the design part, the design of the system part, really helps so that there is just a speedy development, just like development testing and then we're done. But maybe one aspect that I would also like to emphasize on the execution part is exploratory testing. It's a web application. Users most of the time don't know what they're supposed to be testing, what they're supposed to click, where they're supposed to go. So having a process during the regression test or before a new product is launched to just go play with the application, trying to break it for no other reason than just trying to break it really helps in the long run to identify some gaps that we might have not noticed while writing the test cases or gathering the requirements.
I can add something. So it's something we didn't touch on, and it's a best practice to both of us, developer and QA, to use the TDD and the BDD. TDD, when it comes to the developers, we expect, it's an assumption that you have done the TDD before you deploy it to our environment. Oh, thank you so much. Test-driven. Yeah. So they write the test that will test if their code runs before they even start writing codes. It's a best practice to the developer. And then also the BDD, the behavior-driven. also the developer do, but also the tester can do. Now it's assuring the behavior of your code if they are now, responding to the need. Now you are testing the behavior of the system or the functionality of the system. You are not testing the functionality of the system because 1 + 1 = 2, it's functional, TDD has passed. But BDD might fail because you said 1 + 1, I need to be 10. I know it's wrong, but that's a requirement you set for the other reasons probably. So you test the idea behind the algorithm. Is it doing what it's programmed to do? So if you, the developer, have run the TDD and the BDD, or with the help of the tester to do the BDD, actually their code, the script you write based on the requirement, you can use Gherkins, can help you on that. And then from that, you will continue with the rest of the tests on the test levels. Different test levels? Yeah, home. Yes. Actually, you wanted to love a little bit. Yes. So it helps you when it comes to the test levels, you know what test you're going to run. You don't worry much about the functionality and the BDD. Now you are assuring the quality smoothly. Is there an API? I'm running it. Is this an E2E? I'm running it. Is it a manual? I'm running. Is it, all those types. Thank you.
All right. We've been talking about fancy things around testing. But as you said, test is not exhaustive. So, okay, let's use Irembo as an example. I'm a user. I'm trying to apply for a service, and I kind of find a bug. Okay, you said you test, you do this in this environment. What happens when things go to production? Do you keep, maybe once in a while, check whether something has broken, or do you just leave it there?
No, we don't just leave it there. And we, as Irembo, we are lucky to have a CX team that just reports all those issues as they happen. And they also test the application before it goes live. They're part of the validation. So they also take part in acting like the users before it's deployed. So it's one added layer there. But even if it goes to production, because, we're just human and some things will pass us by. And so after it goes to production, there are processes like that the CX team implements, since they're the first ones to get to the users. They're the first one that...
Sorry, what's CX?
Customer support, customer experience. Yes. Okay, sorry. So, yeah, they create the bugs, they raise the issues to us, and then we go through a process of having it added to our backlog so that it can be a feature improvement.
All right, thank you very much. I think this is where our conversation ends. Now we're open for questions. Wow.
We're not convinced.
These are developers coming for you. Yeah, the young man at the front.
Okay, hi. My name is Mike. I'm a front-end developer. And on behalf of front-end developers, you guys are our worst nightmare. I don't know what you do. I've done my thing very well. I don't know where you go and run, like which I don't know, is Firefox or what. Like the CSS is...
It works on my machine.
I'm like, but it worked on mine. Anyways, I feel like this is a really nice job, You get into office, this button is not nice. You're like, hey, Mike, move this button. So what is your typical day as a tester? And then how often or at what point do you check a bug and be like, okay, you can have it as a feature, I think this bug is really nice. And then what do you think is the future of testers? Do you think you guys will be there in the next maybe 5 years?
First of all, why are you attacking us? Why? Well, let me first start with that. I think we'll be here because, we might not be. Who knows? We don't know the future, but I think we will be here because As much as AI has improved, AI is still a software, and it's still a software that needs to be checked. So it can help us get to... It can help us achieve a specific purpose, and I believe in having AI help in testing. So it can help us achieve a purpose, but the tester herself, myself, will still be needed to write the test cases and to challenge what the AI is doing. Your other question was?
When do you change a bug to a feature? When do you change a bug to be a feature? Be like, okay, this bug is kind of...
Well, let's say in that scenario where it's just a discussion, and it's not harming anything in production, and the product manager or the product owner deems it fit, then it can be a feature. Or when we see that you just balance the scales and see, is it necessary to have this as a bug fix right now? Or can we maybe do it in the next sprint? But usually when it's a requirement, you have to fix it.
All right, let's save the energy of our players. Maybe Belinda, you can touch a bit on your normal day as a QA tester. It was one of the questions you asked. Yeah. What's your day-to-day like as a QA lead?
Well, being a QA is really interesting. I mean, you get to test different products and get to see different things from different angles. So my day-to-day will be like, in the morning, I will first check my emails and Teams. At work, we usually use Teams and see if there are any requests of tests. Usually I have some work pending, and I will give priority to what needs to be done first. Some of the work that I might be doing might have a lesser priority to some new test that comes up. So priority is really key for a tester, especially that I'm a lead. I have to allocate priorities because the requests are many, but not everything can be done on a daily basis. So we allocate priorities. We see what has most priority, what change needs to be applied on production, and we test that first. And we make sure that we really get the result that is needed from the stakeholder. Like the requirements, we have the requirements documents. Every day when I get like requests of tests, I also request requirements for me to make sure that I understand what the product owners want me to do. And then I have also a test script to help me do the tests that will channel my testing. And also I make sure I have a good communication with the support team, like the developers, because whenever I get a defect or bugs, they are the ones I report to. That's it. That's mainly it.
All right, thank you very much. Next question.
Sorry, Bit, I wanted to ask something you ask about when do we change a bug to be a feature? I will be more technical. A tester doesn't assign this will be a feature or not, right? But the developer, power of three, speaking as a nutshell, when you are doing the sprint planning, you do the task breaking down to know the priority of the sprint. So when it comes to that bug have reported by the QA team, then you see it's really huge. It requires more efforts, more technology. It will touches more than one feature or more than one functionality. It's bigger. And then probably you assign it to number 13, and 13 is the biggest task to be delivered within a month or quarter. Definitely it's not a bug. It is a bug, but review the new functionality that's needed, but the decision remains to the product owner and the business stakeholders to know when this can include as a feature or not, and when to work on it. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. My name is Rosine. I'm a QA engineer. And my question goes to all of you. Yes, so speaking about testing and release, How do you approach the testing when you have more than one environment of testing? Like you have the UAT environment, you have a dev environment, you have a sandbox, or even the prod environment. How do you, what are the techniques, or how do you approach the testing on all those environments and assure that the product or the feature can just go and be used by users? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will answer this like, actually we need to know who's doing what at which level and who's doing what at which environment. That might help. Secondly, I will give an examples of the past project I worked on. The one was with the Canadian, another one was local. So definitely the good practice is there. Everyone has the environment to play with and to test with. Technically, dev is for a dev, but they might ask help for the testers also to help because it's a team, okay? Because most of the people call it release, I don't know why, but dev environment. Mostly the QA comes on the staging environment, the QA environment, which mimic 100% the production. That means the configuration of a whole production should be a copy of the staging environment. I believe it's true because the developer is the one doing it. So all testers, all engineers in the house for the testing, they work on test environment, staging environment. And then the business people, including CS, customer satisfaction, customer support, product managers, product owners, everyone is playing with the business. They might be also on staging as well as on production. But on production, with, let's say, like 1 or 2 user accounts, because it's production, you are inciting your data in the database, in the database with the users and the clients, okay? So if you have that practice in place, everyone plays on each environment, it's better. But I understand the workload might be big and the resources are few. Then we need to help each other, okay? So from the example I told you, the company I worked for from the Canada, I couldn't even touch the production. Set was insane. My environment was staging, and if something fails in staging, assumption should fail on production. And then the CS, the customer satisfaction or business analyst, will test the same thing I did with the whole steps on the production. If it doesn't fail, and then the developer need to check if the configuration, if really the production mimics the environment of staging. That means everything I've tested on the environment of my staging environment is not correct because I'm testing on the wrong environment, which is not the copy of the production. And then what they had to do, of course, they have to data migration of the database from the production to the testing environment, and then I test and it passes. That means they mix up the environments, right? So Kigali team, Kigali project I worked on, all CS was testing on the production. And then the database came a mess. With all different data you are inciting, all data protection things you are revealing, all the thing outside. The testers say, oh, hey, we have got to the bleach, please help on production as well. Everyone is on production, including the client on production. And then the performance goes down. Everything's chaotic. You see? So we need to know what is the best practice when it comes to the environment as well. And we need to have a clear communication of who's doing what, where. And then if you need support with the communication that to the product owner, hey, I'm running this on the production. When it comes to security testing, you can't just run security when none knows is Isabel is running it at this time. Otherwise it will be. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I think Isabel has expounded a lot on this. So because of time, we take other questions. You've asked.
No, maybe behind you.
You've asked.
Thank you. My name is Joy. I'm a QA as well. So I just want to ask the panel because I have heard that they are lead. So my question is this. Actually, we have talked about the steps that should be followed as QAs, but as we know, the fight between the DevOps and the QAs, so I'm asking, like, for instance, if there's that such agreement, and as a test lead, how do you solve them? For instance, if you are test lead and one of your team is arguing with the dev, and it's that much chaos, so I just want to, like, how do you solve that, like a practical way? Because, like, we've been talking about theories, but when it comes to practice, sometimes you find, like, I don't know. Thank you.
Maybe Belinda, you can talk.
Yes, I was about to share. It's good to let it cool down a bit because the spirits are somehow up. It's good to let it cool a bit, give it an hour, 2 a day, but not too long because the argument can be easily forgotten. So it's good to give it a time to cool it down. Then you have a small meeting with the teammate and the developer who had that kind of argument and try to understand both sides. In that kind of case, if you are the lead, it's not good to have a side. It's good to be somehow in the middle. You get to understand the side of your teammate and the side of the developer and help them to resolve diplomatically that issue. Because at the end of the day, you need your teammate to do the test with, and you need the developer to fix those issues. So you need them both. You have to find a way as a leader to have a common ground so that you make them understand how they can both help each other in the work and even work that issue out through communication.
All right, thank you very much. Seems we have time for just 2 more questions.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. So I am Iladukunda Arefiakle, and I'm also a QA engineer at Lord and Schwartz. So I had one question. So it's relating to automations. So I wanted to ask you guys if you can go through how if there is like hardware dedicated for the automations, and also if it's there, how is it deployed? And also, I wanted to ask, like, in general, in the random industry, QA industry, which techniques are mostly used for automation? If also, is there something like reinforcement learning, which is being used in the random industry? Thank you.
Eliane, you want to take that?
Wrong person. Anyway. You asked about the tool and how to install it.
No, I asked about how...
Infrastructure.
Yes. Do we have like dedicated infrastructure for the automations? Mm-hmm. If we do, how is it deployed?
I bet I don't know. That is the honest. I don't know if there is infrastructure for that. Me, I use browser stack to automating on the cloud. And when it comes to my framework, I just download and install in my machine. And I write my scripts. That is the honest. Maybe in the audience, if someone knows, can help us on that, then I learn from you as well.
The lady at the end.
Thank you so much. I have a question, actually 2. One is around regression testing. The other one is around performance testing. So what are the why is it important to do regression testing, especially when, for example, the components of your codes around the service are different and maybe a change that is deployed on one component is not affecting everything? The second question about performance testing, I wanted to understand why is it important when you've performed regression testing and everything you've tested before they go on production. Why is it important to do the performance testing once in a while?
I can start with the second one. I hope it's fine. Well, it's really important to think performance testing as a testing on its own that needs to be done for a web application, for you, the owner of the web application, to be sure that it's going to perform well. Sometimes you may develop a web application having in mind, for example, 100 users. But it may happen that 1,000 users can use that application. But if you have not done the test early, planning and implementing, like thinking what will happen if 1,000 users are concurrently using this application, what will happen? Will it survive? Will it respond as usual? If you have not planned that early enough, your system might crash. It may have the best features, the best transaction, the best whatever, but if it's not responding, that will be a big mess. That's one. And also, how is it working with, how is the network on that web application? Does it get connectivity easily? That is all those small things that performance testing does, to see if it responds well, if the amount of users is increased, how does it perform? Is it still working as usual, or is it slow, or does it crash? All those are scenarios that can happen, and you don't want your reputation to be affected with those kind of issues. And talking of regression testing, it's really important, though you have different components, because though they are different, they are somehow connected. You never know what can happen if you make changes on one feature that is connected to the other, how that one that is connected to it would be working after that. So it's good to have a regression test after making those changes to make sure that everything is working as normal. You don't want the user on the outside to do the test for you and see those gaps in that particular product before you. So testing helps avoid those gaps beforehand.
All right, thank you very much. I think that's all we have time for. After, you can always meet with the panelists after this and maybe ask them the question one-on-one. I know they will be happy to answer. Thanks a lot, and have a good evening.